Hey everyone, we're back doing this again, episode number 15. I'm your host, Lori Ayers. This is Everything Women's Wrestling. I get to ask all kinds of different questions to Malory Velte today. And so lots of different topics in today's episode. We get into some conversation starting us off with her time at Simon Fraser University. She talks about what's going on at Simon Fraser. Why are there so many alums who are making world teams, national teams? So she gives us a little bit of background about her experiences there. Mallory also talks about her time at Oregon State and her involvement with the Beaver Dam RTC now, and her thoughts on RTCs and how important they are for women in the sport of wrestling. So she also gets into some information and shares with us some of the leadership roles that she has at USA Wrestling. She serves on the executive committee and several other committees, so she talks about that, as well as her involvement at Southern Oregon University and her excitement about that program. She talks about good advice she's gotten as a wrestler, bad advice. She talks about some of the mindfulness techniques and strategies that she uses. So it's not an hour to be missed. Definitely join us, and I'm so glad you're here. All right, Malory Velte on the show today, our USA Wrestling World Team member at 65 kilograms. How is everything going in Oregon today, Mallory?
Everything's going great in Oregon. Just finished practice, so kind of done for the weekend. So yeah, I'm in a good place.
Very cool. Well, you had an amazing start to your summer. There's no doubt about that. So how has summer been for you in the weeks after Final X?
Summer's been good. It's been nice because it was like a grind to get through, open world team trials, final X. So it was nice to take a little time. But now I'm starting to get like really excited about my prep, and it's nice to have, all my teammates and everyone supporting me through the summer. So yeah, it's been really good.
Awesome. Have you been able to get some fun things like in your schedule so it's not all
Oh
wrestling?
yeah. Oh yeah, always. Camping, we're going boating this weekend, some stuff like that. So yeah, no, it's a good time.
Oh, good. Outside stuff. All right. Well,
Yeah.
I want to jump in with some questions. We don't want to go way back to like when you were wrestling as a child, but we want to we want to go back a little bit to your collegiate experience. And so I don't think I'm certain I wasn't the only one who was noticing the representation or the alumni representation of Simon Fraser University at our Final X event. And so, you were wrestling in it. We saw Dom Parrish, Helen Morales, who they're all alums of Simon Fraser, Alex Hedrick, Lauren Mason. Am I missing anyone?
If you are, I'm sorry for whoever's
Yeah.
missing, but yeah, Simon Fraser was a great development for all. I mean, obviously all of us. There's more world representation going to be there in Serbia because the Canadians, Justina, I think, and Anna, Carla is a current. Going to Simon Fraser currently, so yeah, there's a lot of Simon Fraser that's going to be at the World Championships. It's cool. I mean, it's our coach, right? We all have the same coach, Mike Jones. He's created a few Olympic champions, Helen, but before that, Carol Wynn, the first Canadian Olympic champion, Daniel Galley, Canadian Olympic champion. So there's a really special thing happening there. And unfortunately, Mike's retiring now, and I have full faith in the current coach, Justin, who I know Alex Hedrick and a few of those guys wrestled only under for the most part, and he was a 2020 Olympian and competed for Canada for a long time. So it's just a great development program up there. That's why we all go there. It's also nice to be in a big city, Vancouver, different country, kind of a different experience, but it's cool.
Sure. No, that makes sense. And it seems like it's going to continue to be, like you said, a powerhouse in women's wrestling. So it's interesting then to compare your experience wrestling for a Division II NCAA school in women's wrestling, and now you're spending so much time at Oregon State with a Division I men's program. So I'd love to hear about the similarities and differences that you see between the experience you had and what you see going on at Oregon State for the men there. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, obviously the difference between like facilities and things like that from a D2 and a D1 is kind of not comparable. It's so much more support staff and access to weight rooms and athletic therapists and all of those things is so much better at a D1 school. But the convenience is nice. It's not necessary, as we know in wrestling, to have all the bells and whistles to be
Mm-hmm.
successful. So yeah, it was like humble beginnings, I guess, starting from a D2 and then moving to D1 now to train. But I think at this point in my career, like making things like easy and simple and having like a full-time coach and things like that just takes the stress off. So I'm happy to be at a D1 school, but if I had to do it all over again, I would still go to Simon Fraser and have that experience, because it was obviously led to my own development, like no other.
Well, it hasn't been a bad path for you. Clearly, you're doing okay. So it's a good stuff.
Yeah.
But okay, so how has the men's program at Oregon State included the women that are there? Because we're hearing such wonderful things about how women are feeling welcome there. You know, you're talking so positively about it. What has your experience been like being part of that D1 men's team?
It's hard to say if it's like a top down, like the coaches respect us and like welcome us, and so the athletes do too. Or if it's just a great group of humans that's like unique to that area. But yeah, we are welcome. The guys are, willing to come into all of our extra practices when we need them as partners and stuff. And they always do so like with a good attitude, and like really encourage us and support us. They like watching our final legs, watching us compete and stuff, and us them. So it's nice to have that group of guys to support us and to do this with a team rather than individually kind of going rogue. It's nice to be a little collective group with the same mission. So yeah, I'm really grateful for them. And when I have the chance and stuff, I like to stay for their practices. I like to watch them and support them because we just like enjoy each other.
That's awesome. So, what do you think then? Do you think that the men are also benefiting from the presence of the women being on campus too? Do you think that adds to like the ecosystem of the entire organization, having the women present as well? Do you think they're getting something out of that relationship too?
Yeah, I've thought about that because a lot of people say there's no value to women in RTC since we're not like a recruiting draw or whatever. But I know that there is some value. It's hard to like put your finger on it, but they definitely maybe feel safer around women than they would with all male coaching staff. Some of them, maybe some of them like need that. I don't know. It's not like maternal support, but it's just like safety. Maybe it's something that you can't really put your finger on. But like I know for me, like coming from a family where I wasn't very involved with my dad, like it was important for me to have male role models to as coaches, and I think the same is true for the guys, right? Some of them are going to benefit from having female role models, from having females around who are yeah, I don't know, healthy, good for them. So whatever I can provide to the guys, I try to, even if it's just like, how are you doing today? Or, you look like you're getting better, or how's your injury? Maybe you should stay off of it, kind of things like that. Just support them and know that they're cared for. I think that's all of us kind of want. So that's what I try.
Yeah, and I mean, from that, I think my generation is the one that has more of like a misunderstanding and seeing how it all worked together pretty naturally. But I see it happening pretty organically, right? I think most of the time you just think of each other as teammates and you're helping one another and you're both dedicated to the sport of wrestling. And so it is just this ecosystem that works pretty nicely without a lot of additional like effort.
Mm-hmm.
From my perspective, from what I've seen. But okay, so so what are your thoughts? So collegiately, you experienced Division II at Simon Fraser, and now you're at Division I men's program. Like, if you looked at or were talking to Mallory, someone, a female wrestler who is going from the high school to the collegiate level, like, what are your thoughts on the choices that women have right now for going to college and wrestling?
Wow, it's crazy. I think about this all the time because there are so many more choices now than there was when I was choosing a college, and I can't even imagine the difficulties like girls coming out of high school are having picking colleges. I mean, it's good; it's more opportunities, but I mean, when I chose Simon Fraser, they weren't the powerhouse college program. They were still OCU, who was on like a 5 streak winning of the nationals. So I don't think that girls coming out of high school need to necessarily pick the number one program. they've got to pick a place where they feel like they fit. So I think that visits are important. So if I was to do it all over, yeah, I guess like visit, make a short list, visit the places, and then now there are like creative solutions. If you look at like the Blades is going to ASU wrestling at that RTC, like you don't even necessarily have to compete on a college program, but I do think that there is a good development aspect in getting 40 matches a season in college. So, yeah, I don't know. It's a really weird time and it's really exciting. And I think that we still have a few more years until we have more D1 options open for women. So right now, it's kind of like a wait and see, but it's exciting. And I don't think that D1, D2, D3, if you look at the things that some of these different universities are doing, even like Lampy coaching at Linfield, that could be a really good fit for a lot of people. So I don't think that there's necessarily the hierarchy. The best are going to D1, the worst are going to D3 or NAI. That's definitely not the case in women's wrestling right now. So we have, our top athletes at all levels of universities and all sizes of schools. So yeah, it's exciting. And I mean, obviously, I wrestled in the WCWA where we all got thrown into the same national tournament, and now there's like NCAA's versus NAI. So in a way, it's like, yeah, I don't know. It's different. It's way different, and I can't even begin to even grasp it. I've had to try it as a coach because I went from, helping out at Simon Fraser after I graduated, which is an NCAA school, going to the NCAA Nationals, to now helping out at Southern Oregon, where we're going to the NAI Nationals, only competing against NAI schools. It's a huge smosh, and it'll get sorted soon, I'm sure. But right now, it's quite a situation.
Really great point you're bringing up, though, because in women's wrestling, there is not a distinction in terms of skill level between the NAIA and the NCAA. Like the competitive levels in both of those associations is very, very much the same. Do you agree?
Yeah, it's like comparable for sure. I don't think that one is harder or than the other, and even like within the NCAA schools, like you look at Yelena McCoy, and she's going to D3 school, like, and she just won all these tours over the summer. That wouldn't happen in men's wrestling. You wouldn't have like a D3 athlete winning internationally and being ranked in the top few. So yeah, it's challenging. It's interesting, and NAI is doing really well. I mean, the NAI is killing it. So
And
I'm
they
excited.
and
Yeah.
they're the first association to have a championship now. So next year will be the first official championship for a women's wrestling association. So NCAA obviously is an emerging sports status, and so hopefully, fingers crossed, we're heading in the right direction there. But NAIA is the first one to get it done, so kudos to them.
Yeah, definitely. It's exciting times. I'm excited to see like the more like opportunities that are going to emerge for these young women. That's cool.
So what are you hearing at Oregon State? Any rumblings on programs there?
I have not heard any rumblings on programs, but I'd be the first one to apply for the coaching job if that was a thing. Because yeah, it's exciting. But right now, I think that they're not in a position to add new sports. They probably have to partner with the men's. Like if to add any for the Title IX, if you can add two together, maybe they can add like a men's volleyball, women's wrestling, something like that. But so there'd have to be definitely someone behind, like masterminding it and working with the athletic department. It's possible, but nothing I've heard of.
Well, no doubt, though, the presence that you guys are bringing to Oregon State through the Beaver Dam RTC is important, the visibility and just being on campus. So we'll keep our fingers crossed. But yeah, hopefully, like you said, we start to see like more momentum there because we want wrestling opportunities at all levels. And so, but good stuff. All right. So Mallory, you graduated from Simon Fraser in 2018, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then a few days after you graduated, you made your, was it your second world team?
Yeah, that was my second world team. That was the first year they started doing Final X, was in 2018. Yeah.
Okay. And so then you went to Bulgaria, you bronze medaled there. So you're a world bronze medalist. Now in 2022, you're making the next world team at 65 kilograms. So talk a little bit about the difference of this period between, the world team that you made to go to Bulgaria and now the world team when you're heading to Serbia in September. Like, what kind of differences do you see in yourself as an athlete? Who was the Mallory then versus the Mallory now?
That's a good question. I mean, sometimes I think about that. I'm like, would I beat myself or like 2018 version of myself, or how would that match go if 2022 wrestled 2018? But Yeah, I think that now I'm obviously like 4 years older and I'm like wiser and I'm more confident and patient and some things like that. Like, so it's kind of like fine wine, I hope, where, it just gets better with time rather than spoiled. But yeah, I think that now I'm a little more like grounded. I think then it was just like, you're just young and you're like going through the pipeline and going to a million tours a year and like don't ever get a chance to get settled and breathe. And so that's kind of the opportunity that I was given with not making little teams in the last few years, was to figure out like who I am, what I stand for, why am I still wrestling, like a moment to breathe and reevaluate like my values and who I want to be moving forward. And so knowing that, I think that can only lead to better wrestling. So, yeah, I wrestle, but I'm more than just a wrestler. And so I think that's what I know about myself now in 2022 that I didn't in 2018. So, yeah, I don't know. I'm excited.
Awesome. Well, I've heard you talk a lot about mindfulness in some of the interviews that you've had, which I love to hear, and I'm trying to learn myself. Like you said just a little while ago, you're obviously more than just a wrestler. There's so much more to you, and just to stay mentally healthy. So, talk to us a little bit about what are some techniques and some things that you're doing now to help you in your daily life with mindfulness.
So I started practicing meditation in 2018. My sports psychologist, who I still work with, was like telling me to do it, telling me to do it. I wasn't really doing it. And then she's like, "You're a month out from the world championships. Just do it for an hour a day, every day, whether you believe in it or not, or whatever. Like, why not? You have nothing to lose." So I did it. And then that's when I had like a crazy tournament. It was like not expected to, medal at that world championships and finish with a bronze. And so I was kind of sold after that. And in terms of like techniques or practices, I mean, there are like a lot of different practices. Luckily, like I work with a couple of sports psychologists, one of them who does Zoom meditations that I join with Adeline and a few of the other athletes. Sometimes Alex Hedrick pops on, or, rugby players and stuff like that. So that's a great practice I use. And then honestly, just using technology to the benefit rather than detriment of mindfulness. So just like getting on, like right now I'm using Insight Timer. I know Catherine Shy also used Insight Timer. It's a good app to track minutes. So now that I'm getting ready for the World Championships again, I'll be bumping up my meditation, 45 minutes to an hour a day for the 6 weeks prep to it, and just committing to doing it, which is like, the hard part is sitting down and sitting still. The easy part is when we're just like buzzing around doing things. The hard part is like the not doing. So yeah, it's challenging. Like a lot of people say they'd rather like do the hardest workout ever than sit down and try to do a 20-minute meditation. But it's a good challenge, and it definitely helps me stay present, stay in the moment, and kind of release the pressure, expectation, and things like that. Sometimes I think that I don't really know what's going on until I have a moment to like sit there for 20 minutes and be like, oh, I'm actually like really stressed out right now, but I didn't even give myself the opportunity to like acknowledge that. And so the more awareness I can build, then I can, control what I can control and make adjustments and stuff. But it's when we're not really aware that things happen and we're reacting, you know. So yeah, it's what I do. So it works for me. I don't know if it's for everyone, but
It's so, I mean, it's so interesting because we're all on on this fast forward mode. It seems like every single day, and social media just comes at us so quickly, and everything's flashing in front of us. And so there is also too so much pressure on high level athletes, and so when you say that you meditate every day for 20 minutes, does that just look like sitting peacefully and trying to like clear your mind of any kind of thoughts that come in and out? Or are you like, do you have like a mantra that you repeat to yourself? Is there music? Like, I'm looking for tips on how different people do this, because I'm trying to get better at it myself.
yeah, so I'll find a quiet place, like usually go in my bedroom or whatever. Headphones or not, it doesn't matter. But like a guided meditation helps if I can like and it like leads through things. But in terms of like clearing my mind, like that's kind of impossible, I guess. Like it happens on occasion, I guess, but for the most part it's just like sitting with things, and like so it'll be like there is, anxiety, and then you just kind of like let it float, and then you can move to the next thing. Like, what am I feeling? Okay, like there is actually some like excitement, or like more accepting the thoughts and feelings that come rather than to like try to block them out. So just welcoming, I guess, anything I have, even if it's like bad feelings. Like there's doubt, doubt's not the enemy. So there can be doubt here, but then there can also be, confidence here. There can also be all the things. There can be like fatigue, but then there can also be like enthusiasm. Like things aren't really, and they can come and go, and we don't have to like attach to like, oh, I'm having a bad day. Like maybe we'll have a bad moment, but then we can move to the next moment. And could be like awesome. So yeah.
I love how vulnerable like you're being, because honestly, I think sometimes we see senior level athletes and we think like, oh, they've got it completely together, right? Like they never have these moments of not being confident, or not like are feeling nervous when they go out on the mat, or having anxiety about events that are coming up. And so how powerful for you to share like that's something that you go through. Like you're having so much success, but you're still like, in a daily grind where you're trying to get yourself to be in a good, healthy place and mindfulness. So, and being mindful. So cool to hear. I'm working on it myself. I'll share with you like a little story. We help out with a youth league. And so one of the wrestlers, he actually happens to be, he's like, I don't know, 8 years old or something. And he's a good, friend of ours, Sean Gray, is actually Sean Gray's son, who's an assistant coach at Princeton. So he wrestled a match, and something happened in the match. I actually think he won, but it was like the match ended, and he was like really like feeling anxious or upset, and so he stood up and he started doing like a mindfulness technique on the mat. He was like. And he's like, doing like breathing in and out, like as he's like doing the things. And we were all like, oh my God, what's he doing? At first we were like, is his hand hurt? Like he was like, doing this thing. So anyway, I think it's so great that we're starting to teach kids, and kids are seeing role models like you talk about it, because it's stressful for these little kids even.
Yeah, super stressful, and it's hard to sit still and not like be on screens all the time too. So like it's even more important now, I think, than ever, right?
Yeah,
So
totally. All right, switching gears. Can you talk a little bit, Mallory, about your involvement? You had mentioned, I think, Southern Oregon University and the wrestling program, but I know that you are connected to them. And then maybe talk a little bit about the decision that they had to hire the women's head coach, Gabrielle Wayrich.
yeah, so I got involved this last year at Southern Oregon University. Joel Gibson was the head coach. He was head coach of men's and women's program. So I had run a clinic in that area earlier that summer, and then just randomly I got a call from Joel asking if I'd want an assistant. So I was like, yeah, like I love coaching. I was actually really bummed about, moving from Simon Fraser down to Oregon State, where there wasn't going to be a women's program that I could be involved helping out in. So, yeah, I was super enthusiastic about joining with Southern Oregon NAI school. I didn't know too much about it. I had recalled it, being started while I was in college, but besides that, I didn't know much. And it was crazy because while I was there helping coach Southern Oregon, going down part time whenever I could, we got a $3 million donation from the old head coach, Bob Ream. So that $3 million allowed Southern Oregon to hire a full time women's coach, when before it was just Joel Gibson doing both men's and women's. So yeah, I knew that they were hiring for a full-time women's coach. I wasn't too involved in the hiring process or anything, but I guess, yeah, Gabby applied. She went through the interviews. They have like athletes involved. The girls said that they were really, or the young women said that they were really got good vibes off Gabby. She came, interviewed, she ran a practice for them, and yeah, they hired her, and I'm excited. I haven't met with her in person yet, but I've been in communication about working with her this next year. And I mean, it's cool because I think she's like the same age as me, and came through the college scene, and so it's really cool to see like women coaching women's programs, because I do think that's good to be, like we can't just have men coaching women for the rest of women's sports, right? We need some women coaching women, and it's good for the young women to see, an adult doing it, being in charge, being competent, knowing the sport. So in that they can see themselves, right? They can see themselves being competent, themselves like knowing the sport, themselves like well represented. So I'm excited, and I think it honestly might be an all women's coaching staff because the other assistant coach who helped with the women's program, Anisi Ramirez, who's awesome, is staying on. And then I think I'm going to stay on for this next year. So it's going to be an all women's coaching staff, which honestly I don't know if that's happened before, maybe, but it's cool. I'm excited.
And Coach Wayrich is from McKendree, right? She was an assistant with
Yeah,
that
she was the
program.
assistant with McKendree, yeah. And we've gotten, I didn't realize that so many transfers would follow her, but yeah, we've gotten a hell of a lot of McKendree transfers now and small Americans and stuff. So yeah, we're going to be a force to be reckoned with this next year.
No, you're right, and I mean it is also great to see so many women coming out to be head coaches, like you had pointed out. When you see it, you can believe it and want to be it yourself.
Yeah.
I actually will put a quick plug in. The Tucker Center is that research center out of the University of Minnesota for girls and women in sport. They put out a women's in coaching report card every year. So it's for Division I schools, but it's to see how many female head coaches we have across all NCAA Division I programs. So it'll be interesting to see like how we continue to evolve with our numbers there. I think they're actually doing more work with D2 and D3, but hopefully we can keep getting more female head coaches. It's really great to see that happening.
Yeah, it's super cool. And I don't know, it's interesting because when I got to Southern Oregon, I didn't know, the team I was walking into. And then I get there and the team I'm walking into is like honestly 75% half Asian girls. And I'm like, what are the chances? And then I just like fit right in there. So there's something to like representation and like connecting with athletes because immediately felt like part of the team and like welcomed and I don't know, some sort of connection. And so yeah, it's interesting to have like diversity and women and coaching staff. I think like really 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 helps. So
Well,
it's
actually,
cool.
there's data on the diversity element of it too, of coaching. So 100%
Yeah.
spot on. Yeah. On that report. So very cool. All right. Well, speaking of women in leadership, coaches, but also there's other ways to lead within the sport of wrestling, and you, Malory Velte, are doing it. So I think this is going to surprise people to hear about all of the ways that you are involved behind the scenes, in addition to everything else that you have on your plate and trying to help out to guide the sport of women's wrestling. And so I hope I'm not embarrassing you, but you are serving on the executive board or the executive committee for USA Wrestling. You are on the ethics committee. You are on the athlete advisory committee. You also are the rep on the athlete advisory committee that sits on the U.S. Olympic and Paralympic committee for the athlete advisory for USA Wrestling. So why are you volunteering in this way? Like, you seriously don't have that much time in your life, and you're taking the little bit of time that you have and you're giving back in this way. Why is this important to you?
Well, I am not like I don't like talking about myself that much. I like to advocate for others though. So that's like when I first got involved, which is like running for the AAC. Jess Medina actually was the rep who in 2018 she got hired on right with USA Wrestling, and so she had to step down from her board seat, and so there was a vacancy, and I knew Adeline was involved. She was my friend, so I was like, looks kind of interesting. I'll put my name in the hat, and then I don't know. It takes a few years to be honest to like become to like realize what's going on inside all of these boards and committees and like the responsibilities and like what I'm actually supposed to be doing. It was a huge learning curve in terms of like professionalization because how many young people serve on boards? Not that many. It's a especially with mostly older white men who are dictate the conversation. So it took me a bit to like find my footing and find my voice and think about what types of advocacy things that I'm interested in, how I can support the athletes, how I can communicate and be transparent. Yeah, so I ran again and got elected back in, and then that was in 2020. So I represent wrestling at the US OPC AAC board reps I represent wrestling like freestyle, men's freestyle, women's freestyle, and Greco-Roman, and it rotates every 4 years. And so before the 4 years was with a men's freestyler, which was Tony Ramos. He was our old rep. And then the new quad was coming, so it was going to rotate to a women's freestyler. So I was like encouraged to put my name in the hat for that, and I did. And then I got voted in for that. So that's a 4-year term. And with that, I'm like automatically put onto the executive committee of the USA Wrestling Board of Directors. And recently, in June, I went to Colorado for the USOPC assembly, which was like a whole weekend. But yeah, it's a lot. It's a lot of advocacy. It's still a lot of learning, and I try to represent wrestling as best as I can. I try to advocate for the athletes as best as I can, and it's always like work and like fulfilling, but it's a challenge. So this next year, I'm not going to be running for the AAC spot. I'm like taking myself out of the ring for one of the responsibilities. And so I'm really excited because it kind of gives a new opportunity for whoever this new rep that gets elected in, to help them get their feet wet and kind of reduce a little bit of that learning curve that took me a long time to master. So I'm excited for whoever gets elected. If you're watching this and you are a 10-year athlete, which means that you've represented the U.S. at a world championship in the last 10 years, or you've represented the U.S. at a Pan Am Games in the last 10 years, you are eligible to run. So please do, because it's a non-paid position that is very, very important and is a lot of work, but it's worth it. So I'm excited. The elections are happening in August for this new rep position, and I hope that we get some young blood in there, because right now the women's freestyle reps are me, Adeline, and Veronica. We're all kind of, not getting too old, but we're on the upper echelon, so it'd be good to get some young blood in there. Yeah, so I don't know if you have questions. I didn't really explain that super clearly, but
no, you explained it really well. I think one of the things that you said that's super important to get out is that it takes a while to get used to being on these boards, right? And so we need to continue to change the makeup of who sits at the table, and make sure we have representation. So you spending the time to learn that. And now I hear you saying, like, I'm going to make it easier for the people coming behind me. I'll be here as a resource and mentor those next individuals that take a step forward and sit down at the table. So like, I am over here like, yeah, talk more. And I'm myself doing that, right? Like I didn't wrestle myself. I have, no business. I'm sure people hear me talk and they're like, who is she? Like, what is she? What connection does she have to wrestling? I literally am just trying to be a leader, as I guess a place holder for whoever's coming next, a woman who's at the table. And so when I see women like you also at the table, it's comforting to me. And I think it makes us all feel a little more comfortable, and to get different perspectives and different voices in there is so important. Diversity, of all different types. And so I applaud you. Keep going.
Oh, thanks. No, you're doing the same thing. I mean, that's the first time I met you, right? It was at the USA Wrestling Assembly, the board of directors meeting. And so I don't know if I'm going to be there this August. I think I might actually have to skip that one because I have to obviously get ready for Worlds. But yeah, it is more comforting when there's more of us at the table. And right now we have Joan Fulp, who's, our second vice president. And so to have a woman who's like at the highest end of our leadership is really exciting. So it's cool times.
No, it totally is. And Joan has a lot of roles. She is also the second vice president of the board, but she's also the chairperson for the Women's Age Group Council now. And so she's doing great work. And, in Fargo, I actually am the Northeast representative for the Women's Age Group Council, and got to be part of some discussions about, how maybe we're going to like propose or make a motion to change some of the qualification procedures for the girls out at Fargo, and make sure that we're really vetting it out and thinking it through. And so that will be a conversation at the summit. But yeah, like you said, it's just great to see that women are getting involved. There's so many strong women. Charlotte Bailey is on that council, and Geneva Gray is on that council. Christy Davis. I'm forgetting people, but it's really filling out with some good representation. So definitely want to keep that going.
Yeah, sure.
Okay. All right. So I want to talk a little bit more about your RTC experience, Mallory. So again, we talked a little bit about this at the beginning, but we've heard you on different interviews talk about the Beaver Dam RTC so highly, about the coaches, Nate Angle, Chris Pendleton. Like, we know that they're giving you the support that you need, along with many other women. So talk a little bit about your experience there, and how important do you think RTC opportunities for women are at this point in women's wrestling history?
I think RTCs are pivotal for, women's wrestling to keep growing, because to have full-time coaches is like completely transformative. That's like why I had to move down to Oregon and leave Simon Fraser in the middle of the pandemic, was because, like we need that support to get to the levels that we want to get to. That's honestly like the biggest reason that I've made jumps in my wrestling in the last year and a half, is being here at the Beaver Dam, where I can just literally have consistent training with like good partners and like an encouraging support staff with Coach Pendleton and Nate, and now we have Roden, who's awesome, and like Corey, who's one of my favorite people to drill with. So just having that like support staff, being welcomed into a facility. Moving to the OTC isn't for everyone, and right now or prior, that was really our only option if we wanted high quality training, was to be there with all of our competitors living in dorms, right? So now we have a few more opportunities to have creative training plans to go between RTCs. Like, I spent a week at the Tar Heel Wrestling Club out there with Macy a few months ago, and that was like an awesome opportunity. So I think that we're really moving forward, and I'm excited to see if there's any more RTCs that are going to add even just a few female athletes. We're not going to take over. Don't worry. We're not going to like make you feel uncomfortable. Just wrestlers. so I hope that like a few places, open it up. Like, they don't realize that they could actually probably get really into it too now. And Nate says that the best part of his day is when he coaches the women's RTC practice at 9 a.m. He says he loves starting his day that way. I think that there's a lot of other coaches who might find that rewarding too.
Oh my gosh, so true. It's so funny when you hear people who kind of get on board with women's wrestling. It's always like with a personal experience. But we have to get to the point where we start taking people's word for it, right? It's like, everyone who's listening, believe Nate Angle when he says this adds to his day, right? Like yeah. Just get on board. Do you have any thoughts on how do you think like NIL deals might negatively affect some of the money that we see being used to support athletes at RTCs? Like, I'm a little concerned about that. I start to think about like the pressure that some of the programs are under to keep up. And so something we'll have to keep our eyes on.
That's a good question, and one that I probably don't have a super good answer for, but I know that one of our main donors for the Beaver Dam RTC is someone whose daughter was an Olympic gold medalist, I think in pole vaulting. So there are people out there, there are donors that want to support women in sport. And I think that we just connect with them, right? Like, we won't meet them until you have women at your RTC, and then you find that there are donors who support that. So I think that there are niche donors that we can tap into, and that, NIL money is going to be coming from different people who have different aims. There are going to be some people who want to support like women training and competing at the highest level, and that's what they're into. And then there are going to be other people who want to, pay for whatever, a national champion heavyweight, and that's what they're into. But I don't think that the type of donor who's donating to like a women's RTC is the same type of donor who's donating that NIL money, in my opinion. But maybe it's different.
No, those are great thoughts. I mean, I hope not. And I think you're right. There are niche donors that want to be part of growing women's athletics. And so we hope to see that continue. All right. Well, speaking of wanting to like grow women's presence in different places, I saw that you were at the Sports Bra. So that's like BRA in Portland, Oregon. And it's so funny when you put up I think you put it up on like Instagram or something. Like someone screenshotted it and sent it to me. Like, oh my God, have you heard about this bar? It's like for women's sports only. And then Andrea Yamamoto had sent me some messages like, oh my God, we got to get like Flo in there. And like, she should be on the screens. And so
Yeah.
I reached out to the owner. So we've been like emailing back and forth. So like, we'll see what we can get going. But I love the idea. And you just seem so happy being there. So tell me a little bit about your experience going there.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's like not the best thing to say, but it recently got really more interested in like women's sports because, like realizing that the media just doesn't cover it. That's why we're not super interested in it. And then once you do kind of like get into like, even following like ESPNW and some of those like channels who highlight like how awesome some women's sports are and watching it, I'm a fan of like women's tennis and things like that. And so being in an environment when I like walk into the sports bra and it's like literally about like me and like all of my friends and the things that we're into, like, being empowered, like speaking up, Megan Rapinoe and like those kind of people. It was like really cool to see them all amplified on that level. And then you also think about, oh my God, like this isn't happening in like regular sports bars, right? Like they're not like amplifying women's sports at this kind of like even just like having their jerseys on the wall, having their competitions playing on the big screen. Like I went there and I watched the NCAA championship for like pole vault, and that was super awesome. But it's like, where else do you see like women's pole vault NCAA championships on sports bar screens? It was a really cool experience. I'm gonna go back for sure. And then my fiance's like, you should give them a singlet, blah blah blah, up on the wall. Like, no, these like women are like in the next level. These are like actual professional athletes. And so I'm excited because I think that we're like on the cusp of like it becoming bigger and more like widespread and like gaining following, even though it's like slow and we want it to always go faster. I think that we're like at the start of something really cool for women in sport. Obviously we're getting like more support now than ever, so I just see it going up from here personally.
Me too. I do too. And I'm going to rewind for a second. You are absolutely like a professional athlete.
Oh,
You
thank you.
are amazing and such a, great role model along with the other women who are on our team. But yeah, like I was at the a sports bar last night with my husband, and I knew I was going to be asking you this question. So I was like counting the TVs, and there was 20 TVs,
Mhm.
and none of them had women's, like and some of the TVs were like duplicates of the same event, but no women. And so it's just like it's deflating a little bit, right? We want to see it, but if it's not
Yeah.
consumable on a consistent basis, it's hard. But I think you're right, we're headed in the right direction and we see change happening, and so hopefully it keeps
Yeah.
coming.
It's especially deflating when you see like the things that they are amplifying, like nowadays, like cornhole or like spike ball, like these kind of things on like sports bars. I'm like, so those things are higher in priority than like Naomi Osaka or something like that. It's just, yeah, just how it
Yes,
is, I guess.
connection. Very much so. All right. So next question. We're getting towards the end here, I promise, so we can let you go. But I would love to hear and have listeners hear some pieces of good advice that you've gotten as a wrestler, Mallory, and maybe some pieces or the top piece of bad advice that you think like we should squash in wrestling. Is there something that you can point to where you're like, well, that was really terrible advice that maybe I thought was good at first or whatever? And then maybe a piece of good advice that you think is good to continue to spread.
That's a good question. I'll start with the bad and end with the good. So I thought about recent times, like I'm getting, like in a mature part of my career where like the times that I've been hurt and which now an injury can be like the end of our career, right? It's the times I've gotten hurt is like when I've like grinded or like, pushed through walls or like whatever those kinds of like, work hard kinds of uh advice people give, or I guess they're like mantras. I don't know. Maybe it's just like social media culture where it's just like push, push. Like my friend Michaela Beck, who's like psycho and likes to do all those things, like pushes too hard, gets rhabdo, ends up in the hospital, like things like that. I think that that's just like more common than we think in wrestling. When we think that it's like working hard is like the end of it, like working smart, I think, is a better piece of good advice to like push at times where it makes sense to push. But then if I don't have like a competition coming up and things like that, like why would I go super like nuts? It's just like taking a toll on my body and my mind. And then when the time comes, I'm not going to be ready. Right. So, yeah, I think that good advice would be to like work smart, know how to push. We all know how to push. Like that's why we're in wrestling. So, being like well recovered, listening to our bodies, things like that are important. And then when we try to just break through walls and things like that, and like pain is just weakness leaving the body, like those kinds of things is more like when we're closer to like injury, having to take forced time off because we're hurt, things like that. So, yeah, I would say like good advice is just to like work smart, listen to your body. Those kind of things, they matter. They matter more and more at the higher level you get to. And the only person who like can stop me from accomplishing my goals is myself, right? If I do something that's stupid, hurts myself, if I don't listen to myself, things like that. So yeah, I don't know. That helps, but
No, it does help. And I think we need to continue to share good advice, right? Especially with our younger wrestlers coming up so they understand. There is that mentality where I think we're getting away from it a little bit more. I hear more people talking like you just did with like, there has to be you have to be reasonable, right? Like you can't be like as many reps as possible for like as many days as possible for like, it just gets like a little crazy and injury prone, like you had mentioned. So, but good advice is awesome. We have to keep sharing it. Also, good resources, I think, is important for us to continue to share. So if you could think of maybe something that you tap into, whether it's like books or podcasts or like websites, any kind of resources that you would recommend to the listeners of Everything Women's Wrestling?
yeah, I would. I mean, obviously, mindfulness meditation. I would recommend like some of my favorite like guided meditations are from like Tara Brach, Sarah Blondin. So if you can find them on like Spotify or Insight Timer or whatever, those are like a good place to start in terms of like a mindfulness journey. And then like obviously a good place to start in terms of like reading is like The Alchemist by Paulo Coelho. I think that's how you say his last name. That's like a great place to start. If people are like starting their journey, just kind of start thinking like more holistic instead of like pinpointed. Yeah, that's what I got.
I've been recently sharing. I was like gonna write these down. And I'm like, oh, I'm recording this. I can like, later. But Kyle Klingman and I have been going back and forth and sharing resources. He's been so wonderful and supportive of women's wrestling. He always has been. Yeah. But he actually recently wrote an article about like women in wrestling media, and then we've got on a call with a bunch of the women who he's sort of connected us all to. He's like that center of the puzzle piece. Of the puzzle. And so we got on and shared resources, and I thought, oh my gosh, what a great way to just kind of continue to amplify like how things are going good for each of us within the community, whether you're a wrestler or a leader within wrestling. So thank you so much for sharing those things. That's why I kind of try to drop things into like the Tucker Center, because I've just gotten so many great, like they have a podcast now called it's called Tucker Center Talks, and their website is like amazing. So just good like inspiration to get us all feeling good and to be supportive of one another. So appreciate that.
Yeah, I'm interested. I want to hear your guys' what kind of resources you got piled together. I want to see this.
Oh, right. Well,
Yeah.
Shannon Scavall from she works for the NCAA. And she reports, she's a journalist for wrestling. She's also a scholar out of the University of Maryland. She wrote an amazing article that I don't think it's officially out yet, but I read through that. She does great work kind of comparing the way media presents female wrestlers as opposed to the way they present themselves like on their social media.
Yeah.
So it was super interesting to see like how, and I don't want to give it away, but and she's going to have it out, but it's just, I love reading about it because it's really eye-opening in terms of like how the media is presenting women and how they want to be presented or think of themselves, right? Like not always connected to a man, and not always like stories of like when you wrestled boys when you were 8, like, we're still kind of asking questions like that to our Olympic level wrestlers. And it's like, wait, what? It's not something that they're projecting out on their like accounts. And thank God that we have social media accounts, right? That we can project those messages and have our own sort of way of putting things out into the world.
Oh yeah, we have definitely some like interesting and some like unique people. So to like represent the breadth of who they are is just gonna like help young girls see themselves in these women. So yeah, for sure. I'm excited. That's cool. I want to see the article.
Yeah, no, she's amazing. Anyway, and there was lots of different things that were shared. One thing that I've watched recently was on ESPN, 37 Words. Did you see that documentary?
No.
It's Emma Randall shared it with me. It's about Title IX, which is sometimes like a bad word in wrestling, but it shouldn't be. It's so good. It really just goes through like what the law really was and is, and what the meaning behind it was. And they talk a lot about the evolution of the women's soccer team for the United States. They talk about like the rowing team from Yale back in the 70s and how they tried to implement the law. It's a wonderful documentary. And I think anyone in the wrestling community actually should watch it so they have a better understanding of what the law was actually is about, not about like doing away with wrestling programs, which I know has been part of that like narrative.
Yeah, no, that's great. I'll check that out for sure.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Well, am I missing anything? Is there anything else that we should, or want to talk about or share?
I don't think so. Thank you though. This was great. It was nice to talk to you and see you again.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Well, thank you so much, and come back on anytime you want. And best of luck in September.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. All right, have a good one.